Hey everyone, how's it going? My name is Matthew Shonimal, and this is a tutorial by request. Yes, our Facebook page, freelighttutorials.com. Well, actually, the name is Free Lightroom Presets and Tutorials. But essentially, I asked a number of people, hey, so what are you guys looking for? I basically said, I'm looking to create some new tutorials. What do you guys want to learn? And I had a number of people respond, which was awesome. So I had Denise Kata say, hey, I want to learn how to use the radial filter. So that's what we're going to do today. So I'm in Lightroom right now. I've got an image here that's in RAW. It's unprocessed. And an important thing is RAW means it has a lot more variability you can work with. Meaning if you have a JPEG, think of it as a final process photo, whereas a RAW image, you have a lot more in the picture itself. Think of like a JPEG has 5 crayons, whereas a RAW image has 1,000 crayons. So lots more things to work with. So how to use the radial filter, and also why did I choose this image? Well, this is a great image because it has a highlight in it. Radial filters is just a way that you can isolate or influence different aspects of your image. So where to find this? So you have to be in the develop module for it to work. And on the right hand side, if you see here in our tools, just below the histogram, we've got our radial filter, which is the one on the far right. Sorry, one in off the far right. So if I click that, and see the radial filter come up, and if you notice here, let's just say you click it open, and for some reason you had a number of different things happening. Well, you want to reset that. And just a quick little tip is if you want to reset these settings, if you want to do it individually, you can just double click the setting and it resets it. But let's just say you want to reset completely and you want to make sure you have no extra things affecting your filter. You want a brand new filter, you double click the word effect and it resets all of them. So if you notice here, we have a number of different variables, different things we can do. And if you notice, if this looks identical within reason to the basics panel, because in your filter, essentially, you can use the same elements in the basics panel as you can in your filter. So for argument's sake here, I'm going to close this just so I can show you guys what's happened. So I'm going to drop down the brightness just so we can, don't worry, no judgment, but I want to show you what I'm looking at here. So when I open up the radial filter, I'm just going to create a circle. And if you notice here, I made the picture darker so you can see the circle. You see the circle here, right? Now, let's just say you don't want it to be a circle. You want it to be an oval, where you can actually click this little square where you see this line come up and you can change the size. Now, if you want to turn it, you can actually go, so if you go right over top of this square, if you hover, it gives you a flat line, so you can adjust the actual oval itself, or the circle, let's say. And let's just say you want to turn it, because you want this to be on an angle. Well, if you hover just a little bit back, you see the arrow keys on a curve. And if you turn it, click and drag, now you can actually turn and adjust your filter. So it's a pretty simple thing to do, but it's making sure like there's a lot of variability you can do within it. Now, if you notice here, I clicked it just to show what happens when you're done using the filter. Now, we haven't done any settings or adjustments yet, but I want to show you this. So let's just say you go to your radial filter and you're like, oh, it's a new filter, but you see a dot on your screen, a dot just like this. That dot represents the fact that we have a radial filter here. So if I click that dot, it shows me the filter I've already created. So why is this important? Well, different times, sometimes if I'm emulating or want to enhance, let's say, a sun spot, let's say, I may do 3 or 4 or 5 filters, do with different layers of color to influence what's actually happening in the photo. So make that filter or that sun that I want to make look bigger, let's say, look more realistic and not really fake. So let's go to this filter. I'm going to basically click done for a minute and go back up and just reset my picture by clicking the word reset. It brings it back in, and now I'm going to go back to my filter. Love it, looking good. All right, so what do I want to do? Well, I want to make sure I click new, double click the word effect. So I'm clicking new filter, clicking the word effect, and I'm going to go here, create a filter, and let's just drop it down. Now, if you notice here, so whatever's inside of this circle is actually getting darker. And if you notice, it's not exact, right? So it's darker near the center and it's lighter on the outside. It's because we have something called a feather happening. And this over here is the feather. And if you notice here, what happens is if I bring my feather down to 0, it's an even adjustment of this darkening exposure. But we want it to look realistic, let's say. We want it to be, smooth and adjusted. So if we increase our feather, what happens if you notice the outside will smooth and it will be a much smoother transition. So if you go to 100, obviously we see a very little bit of darkness in the center and obviously a much smoother transition to nothing. So think of it as this point, when it's currently like this, the center of the point is 100% of our adjustment and the outside edge is at 0%. Think of it like that. So let's just say, wait a second, Matt, we want to make an adjustment where it's reversed. So if you click here, invert, it inverts the filter to be on the outside. So now if you notice here, you can actually make everything dark and just the center bright. Pretty crazy stuff. Now you might be thinking, wait a second, this doesn't look very good. My goal is not to make this photo look good, but it's to show you the simplicity of how you can use the radial filter. Now you might be thinking, Matt, what is going on here? Why did it just flash red? Well, if you go, when you're inside of the radial filter here, if you go to show overlay, if you click it, it's going to show you red. Because what it's showing you that is, if you notice here, we have a darker red, meaning it's more saturated. If we go all the way in, it gets to a point where there's no red. Well, it's just showing you, it's showing this selected mask. The filter is essentially a mask in this example. And it's just showing you the red represents what is actually being affected by the filter. But it's not actually going red, we're just doing that as the color to show us, or a shade, let's say. So let's click that back off. Now, I'm gonna do some editing and just play with it a little bit and go from there. But look, if you notice, it's a pretty dynamic thing. And what's happening is, it's allowing the outside of the filter to be our adjustment, right? So if you notice here, our adjustment in this filter is -4 exposure. Well, anything outside of the filter is going to be that -4, and then it blends it from here being completely 100% -4 to 0%. So let's just do a couple edits here and have some fun with it. So I'm not going to go -4. Oh, even before we do this, I'm going to click done and go back to my filter. And if you notice here, remember, if you have your filter set up and you click it and you're like, oh, there's a filter there. Let's say you don't want to have that filter. Let's say you want to delete it. Well, all you do is this. You select the filter and you hit delete and it's gone. And you see a little poof and it's gone off the keyboard. So that's a couple simple things about the radial filter. We haven't actually done anything yet, but essentially talking a little bit more specifically on this panel, just to give you some more insight. So the first thing is, well, you want to always double click the word effect to reset the filter. Besides that, the word feather is how you blend your filter itself. The word invert actually reverses the actual filter itself. And beyond that, these are just a ton of different elements you can play with. So I'm going to edit this photo and see what I can do. I'm going to see if I can do some talking through it, because sometimes talking and editing, I'm editing on the fly here. So we'll see what happens. But I'm going to basically enhance this centerpiece with some colors and tones and play with the outside adjustments here. All right, let's see what I can do. So I think it looks all right. I can work with that. Perfect. So I'm going to bring in my radial filter. I'm going to click new, click the word effect. I'm going to go to the center here. Now, if you notice here, there's a sunspot. So I'm going to basically make that sunspot more orange, because it is not orange at all right now. All right, so let's think of our outer ray. So I'm going to add a bit more orange. Looking pretty good. I want to be a bit more orange than that, a bit of saturation. Now, you might be asking, why the heck am I making a filter go all the way out here? Well, if I had a sun ray coming through, that sun ray wouldn't just stop there, right? The sun coming through doesn't just stop there. You want to make it believable that it's actually blending and transitioning across the photo. So that's why I did that. So that is my outer edge of my light rays that I would want to think, because I want to enhance this sunspot. So I'm going to click another one, let's say new, and double click the word effect. And now I'm going to make it a little bit more saturated. Now, if you notice here, this dot just represents that first filter. So I have a new filter set up. I'm going to add a little bit of exposure, a little bit of orange, a little bit of saturation. I'm going to click this word color. Now, if I click this word color, I can select a specific color that will be applied to this filter. And I'm going to make it a little bit more orange. There we go. Because usually the farther you get away from the light source, the less it looks like what we're talking about. So I think that looks pretty good. Let's go a little long here. I think it looks pretty good. So I'm going to click new again to hit another filter and make it a little bit smaller this time. And I'm going to make this color way more. Now, if you notice here, the previous filter I made, by hitting the word new, it actually kept the previous settings. If you notice here, the settings are exactly the same as my second filter, which is actually a good thing for this example, because I'm going to utilize this so the layers keep adding on to each other. I think that looks pretty good. I'm going to add a little bit of brightness. There we go. I'm liking that. I'm going to hit new again, and it's going to add another filter when I create this. Now, I'm going to make this filter go right in the center here. Now, you might be thinking, Matt, I forget what the original photo looked like. So what we're going to do is this. I'm going to click done. And this is not a finished photo, but I'm going to hit the backslash key. And this is what it was. And this is what I've done. And all I've done is highlighted thinking, hey, there is a light ray coming through. And all I've done is added color to sort of emphasize the fact that there is a bright sun coming through. And that's all I've done. I've layered these different filters. Now, if you go back to your filter here, you can actually see there are 4 different filters we can work through, right? This is our first one, which is the much larger filter. Our second one, which is a little bit smaller, it pulls it in. The third one, and then the fourth one. And all I've done is I've increased the amount of color pulling that in. And that's just one way to use it. So hopefully you've learned a couple things about the radial filter. There are so many things you can do with this actual this feature, this tool in Lightroom. So hopefully you learned a couple new things. The radial filter is an amazing tool you can do. Just make sure that with your edits, you don't go really heavy-handed. You want to make sure it's believable. Obviously, that's my opinion, but I always like to make sure that my edits are more believable than not believable. But hopefully you learned a couple new things, you enjoyed the tutorial, and you have a great day.